You're listening to Angel Clark on 92.7 WGMD.
While I live, let me have a country. A free country.
The utmost manifestation of love and devotion to America is today, as it always has been, resistance of tyranny.
Does the government work for us, or do we work for the government?
How long is it going to be before you finally resist and say, no, I will not comply, period?
We have allowed our nation to be overtaxed, overregulated, and overrun by bureaucrats. The founders would be ashamed of us for what we're putting up with.
We've got all the government we need.
In the United States, we have the rule of law. It's the Constitution.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
Welcome back to the Angel Clark Show on 92.7 WGMD, the talk of Delmarva. I have on the line with me Corey Moore. Corey, thank you for joining me this evening. I had a really good time talking with you the last time that we talked, and I think we're gonna try this again and continue our discussion regarding, I guess you could say, liberty-oriented views regarding some of the things that are currently going on today.
Well, thank you for having me again. It's always a pleasure to be on, and I must congratulate you for all the successes you've been having recently.
Yeah, you know what? It's been a really good couple of weeks for me. It's kept me quite busy, but I will say that my show has been growing at a nice fast rate in the past few weeks, which is pretty awesome, to say the least. So, you know, it's fun. It's fun to watch something that you put so much time and effort into. It's fun to watch it grow and expand, which is really cool. But look, see, much of that is the podcast, and we don't really talk too much about the podcast on the FM show. So let's focus on the situation at hand. We don't want to mix up the two shows. Now, you wanted to talk about political prisoners, and who did you have in mind? Who did you want to start off with this evening?
Well, before we get into the actual prisoners themselves, I want to mention that a good friend of mine, Kurt Williams, he runs Kurt Williams and Donna Van Meter, they run a online radio program over at irrigatethestate.net. And for the past couple of years, we've been advocating for people to send Christmas cards to those who are in prison for their political views.
Okay.
And, you know, when you hear the word political prisoner, a lot of people tend to think that there really aren't that many people out there that are being held because of their views. But we're going to go through at least 5 people I have here. Hopefully we can get through all of them. And, you know, they're all in there for political reason one way or another. So if you are interested, and I'll mention this at the end of the hour, maybe in the hour again, defiantforyou.com. There's a link where there's a list of all of these prisoners and their mailing address. It's as simple as going to Walmart, picking up a 99-cent pack of cards. There's like 12 cards in there.
Yeah.
You know, it really doesn't cost that much, and it really will uplift people for the holiday spirit.
Yeah, well, I think something that should be touched on as well is that in many cases, I know a lot of my friends, they go out to political events and they do so knowing there's a chance they could get arrested. And they go to do things like sell lemonade or dance at the Jefferson Memorial or, you know, things along those lines. They see liberty being taken away and they try to stop it. But there's a chance they could get arrested. We've got people that do peaceful acts of protest, like sitting in front of police cars or things along those lines, and they simply refuse to stop what it is that they're doing because that's their own version of liberty, is to be able to do these things. And just because they're out there fighting, it doesn't mean that they're not getting arrested and they're not getting convicted and they're not spending time in prison as well. And during the holidays, it gets kind of difficult, I think, to do these things.
Absolutely. And all these people on this list are either in prison for life or they have an extended sentence and they're not going to be out for a while. So it's especially important, I think, not to forget these people who are defenders of liberty and who were doing the right thing and were peaceful people and are sitting in a cell, in a cage, basically. I mean, that's what a jail cell is for many of them, like I said, the rest of their lives.
Yeah. It definitely is. So who do you want to start with?
Well, I would like to start with the case that always touches me this time of year, especially Ed and Elaine Brown, who in 2007 were brought up on charges of tax evasion. They claimed, and I guess it's up in question really, they claimed that there was no law that said they had to pay a federal income tax.
Yeah.
Now, they went to court basically saying, show us the law that says we have to pay, and we'll pay you. Well, the court never could provide a definitive answer. They never actually charged them. They charged them with a crime, but they never could actually show them the law that said that they had to pay an income tax.
Yeah.
So in, I believe, March of 2007, right before sentencing, Ed went back to his house, and I believe it was in Grafton, New Hampshire, and it was a nice, property. I think he had like 50 acres or something like that. And it was, he went out there to stay, and he didn't want to be involved with this criminal justice system that was going to put him in jail for something he didn't see as a crime. Well, his wife was ordered to stay away, but she decided to come live with them anyway until they were arrested. And the Browns went home, and it hit the news, it hit the media. And this was around the time the Ron Paul campaign got really big. So at the same time, there's a bunch of these new people that are coming in that are against the income tax and are kind of upset to see this older couple. I must remind people, or at least mention it, that they are elderly. They're both in their 60s. And the supporters started showing up at the house. And there was a couple hundred people that stayed out at their house and helped them out and brought them food and gave them moral support throughout the entire thing. Well, because Ed is he was a militia member in the 90s, they already had kind of an axe against him. They were really afraid that he was going to end this violently. But he was also like an avid hunter, and he was just, one of those, I guess, some liberals would call a gun nut. But he had a lot of weapons, and that was just who he was. So Ed had things stockpiled. He had things in the woods that were defensive measures. They weren't bombs, but they were just, contraband, according to some of the federal bans on firearms.
Yeah, well, the thing is that we've seen in numerous situations where the government considers it suspicious to have firearms or to have waterproof matches or to have food stored. And for many of us, it's just a common thing to have in case of a blizzard or a power outage.
Well, yeah, and they believe that anyone who wants to be prepared or who wants to defend themselves is going to go and start shooting a bunch of cops.
Yeah.
And it's just not reality. I mean, we're talking with the Browns, they were peaceful people. Elaine owned a dental practice. Ed was an exterminator. And they were just peaceful people who didn't believe that they were obligated to pay a federal income tax. The only thing they asked was, show us the law. So they're at their what the government called a compound. By all means, it was not a compound; it was just their home. And they had a bunch of supporters coming out, and eventually infiltrators came in and arrested them. Well, their original charge brought 5 years in prison for both of them. But because Ed had weapons, because again he was a peaceful person, but he also believed in self-defense. He had weapons. They charged them both with, I forget the actual crime, but I think it was something across the lines of threatening federal agents or, intent to kill federal agents, and they're both sitting in jail for another 39 years. 37 for Elaine and 35 for Ed.
Wow.
And that means that they would be in their hundreds when they got out.
That's horrifying. But you see, this is what happens when you go against the federal government. when you question one of my guests called it the status quo. When you question the status quo, of course they're going to throw everything they can at you because they don't want the average guy down the street saying, well, hey, why do I have to pay my taxes? Where's the law that says I have to pay my taxes? So instead you throw the book at them for whatever it is that you can so that the average person down the street says, well, hey, I don't want to go to jail for 40 years.
Well, and they not only did that, they sentenced them for that amount of time. I mean, they're going to die in prison. But there were also 3 supporters who also faced various amounts of time in prison. 2 of which were actually journalists like you and I, and one of which was just a supporter. Daniel Riley went up there to support the Browns, and he stayed with them, and he during the standoff, or the so-called standoff, he left their home to walk their dog. He just went out in the woods. And there's a video of this on YouTube. If you look up Ridley Report on YouTube, there's a video of it. And Daniel Riley was just walking the dog. Well, federal agents, camouflaged, jumped up, told him to stop. He didn't know who they were. He started running away, and they shot at him and almost killed him because he wouldn't stop, and I don't blame him. I think that's the natural response anyone would have if you have a gunshot
it's fight or
at you.
flight. I mean, think about it. It's fight or flight. You have 2 choices, and if you're walking a dog, chances are you're not armed. You're probably gonna go for the flight option. Yeah, exactly. So he starts running, and the next thing you know, he's arrested. They tried to have him be an informant. They told him that he would get off for being a supporter if he went back in the house and helped arrest the Browns, be like a snitch. Well, he refused. And because of that, because he refused to sell out his good friends, he got 40 years in prison. He got a longer term in prison than Browns did, and he wasn't even the one hiding out against federal agents. He was just there supporting them. Yeah. I'm not going to say it's unbelievable because I think every day I hear new tales that are things that I previously thought were unbelievable. But still, it's something that I think people need to focus on and pay attention to because a lot of times people don't even realize this kind of stuff is going on around them. And then also, you see these reports in the news and the news spins it because that's what they do. They say, well, hey, look, what we have here is we have these crazy radicals. They didn't want to pay their taxes, but instead of focusing on that, we're going to focus on the fact that they refused to leave their house. They had a standoff, and they had weapons there. God forbid you have a firearm, in this country where we have a Second Amendment that says that we're allowed to have firearms. God forbid you want to defend yourself or use them for even positive reasons like hunting. Or just to collect. You have the right to have firearms, and the federal government continues to override that right, and the state governments do it as well. Although New Hampshire is probably one of the better places. Well, they act like it's suspicious behavior to have firearms, and it's not. Look, right now, my freezer is, I'm not going to say it's filled, but it's got chunks of deer meat in it. Guess where that deer meat came from? Someone with a firearm shot a deer. That's not suspicious behavior. No, but, here again, it's that conditioning. There's been a lot of conditioning, especially since the Brady Bill, and which was a result of the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. And there's been a lot of propaganda that has been put out there to make anyone with a gun appear to be insane. And, I think the tide is finally turning back into our favor. Rational people realizing that guns aren't as dangerous as people play them off to be. And in reality, guns do a lot of good in places where there are a lot of weapons, where people in general have weapons. Crime is very low. Like I said, New Hampshire has very lax gun laws. It's the safest place in the nation to live. So in this case, they were using that against them because they had firearms, and they thought that they had an attempt to, or they were going to attempt to kill these federal agents, which in reality they wanted to have a peaceful standoff, and they wanted them just to show them the law. Now,
there is one more supporter I want to mention, and that's Cirino Gonzalez, and he was up there blogging about the day-to-day activities. He heard about the story on the local, or not on the local news, but over some of the internet sites that we follow, we'll probably follow, and he went up to support the Browns. He just went up there to get their information out, what's going on, the day-to-day life. And he was arrested and charged with, he was charged with helping them. I forget the actual legal term for it, but aiding a fugitive or something. And he got 8 years in prison for it as well, for just simply reporting on what was going on. And it's just insane. I mean, the fact is, I would do something like that as a journalist. I would go and cover a story like that and do live blogging. And the thought that I could be sitting in a jail cell right now or in the future simply because I want to cover a story scares me. It really does. I mean, it's a total affront to the ideas of free speech and the First Amendment.
Well, that's something that you're seeing now, I think, on a more regular basis as well. And you're seeing it, too. I've seen it with some of the stories coming out for different movements where they have people being arrested, and they actually start to arrest and detain accredited members of the press. And you know, it's one of those ways to help make sure that also members of the press kind of stay in check, that members of the press report what they should be reporting instead of reporting what they see.
Well, I mean, and did you know that there's actually laws in the United States that allows the federal government to prevent something from being published? I mean, they do this all the time. I actually did not know this until recently, but there are laws on the books that allow the government to not, they don't call it censorship because it's not post after the fact that it's been published, and they're not going to allow it to be put on the bookshelf or on the newscast. But if it's against so-called national security, they're more than willing to call up the news agency and say, you're not allowed to report that. We're going to throw you in a cage if you do, or sue you or something, because it could hurt national security. So, I mean, the idea of free speech in America, and I'm a firm believer in what Emma Goldman said, that free speech is just a way for democratic governments to pacify the populace into thinking that they are really free, when in reality they're not. But the idea of the First Amendment, you know, we're not following that anymore, and I don't think that the federal government has ever really cared about it. It was put in the Bill of Rights to protect the people for unpopular speech. Like if I want to get on your radio show and advocate for killing cops, I should be able to do that because of the First Amendment. But in a lot of ways, we don't have those freedoms, and in reality, I don't think we ever really have.
Yeah, but I think that there are different aspects of that to touch upon. For instance, I think that some people, it would never occur to them that free speech is there to protect unpopular speech, truly, truly unpopular speech. You know, I saw this expose one time, and the expose was one of the Penn and Teller shows. I love those shows. They do a great job, I think, kind of laying out things and laying out issues. And they went to the White House, and they went to tourists that were in front of the White House, and they said, look, we have this petition here, and it says that you shouldn't be able to protest within 300 yards of the nation's, of the White House, because it's offensive to Americans to protest within 300 yards of the White House. And they got all these people to sign it. And here are these people signing this thing that basically eliminates, the freedom of speech and freedom to assemble. But it never occurs to them that what they're doing is eliminating the right for unpopular speech. So people, they just kind of go along with this stuff because they don't really process it, I think, in many cases.
No, and it's a part of the conditioning, I think, that we've all been through. And a lot of times you have to do a lot of outside learning. You know, in public schools we're taught, that freedom of speech is supposed to exist in civics class. But then you look on the other hand, I mean, if you're in a public school, most public schools have some form of dress codes. You aren't allowed to go after the administration. There's a lot of things you can get in trouble. So in one side, they're saying in the United States, we have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to assemble, and on the other side, you have schools that limit people's liberties and freedoms to act as they please, as long as they're not hurting other people.
Well,
they prevent
you can point to prayer in school. You can point to prayer in school. There is nothing bad about children praying if they want to. You know, I'm not saying that I'm going to go to school and I'm going to break into prayer. I'm not saying you're going to do that, or everyone listening to my show is going to do that. But what I'm saying is that if someone else wants to pray in a public place, including schools, they should be able to. But yet they've taken that out because they're saying, well, you know, it's a separation of church and state. Well, no, that's actually kind of different.
Well, there's a difference between prayer in school and being able to pray in school. When the Supreme Court was discussing this issue, if I can remember this correctly, the issue was schools were forcing people to pray. Now, I don't believe in coercion at all. So, to me, I'm against schools forcing people to pray.
Yeah, but you and I both know they weren't forcing people to pray. They can't force you to pray. I mean, what they can do is they can tell you that you stand during the Pledge of Allegiance, but just don't say it, or stand during the prayer and don't say it. But they can't force you to pray. What are they going to do? A public school is going to hold the gun to your head and say you have to pray, otherwise you're out? Or what? They're going to say you're expelled if you don't pray?
Well, that does happen. I mean, not in this case where there's prayer, but there are police presence in schools now. And if you don't do what a teacher asks you to do, it's insubordination. And there's been many examples of kids who have had their arms broken, who have been arrested, pepper sprayed, and tased, abused because they don't listen to what the teacher has to say, because they don't respect them, understandable in a public school system. So, I mean, personally, if I went back to school knowing the knowledge I do, and this will probably be really controversial, but I wouldn't stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance, because it was written by a national socialist, and I don't believe in pledging my allegiance to a banner, because I'm also a Christian. So that's just one example. There are many reasons. You should have that liberty to sit down as well. But I think we got quite a bit off topic.
We did. Look, I'm sorry. I go off on tangents a lot. I'm sorry. It's been a long day.
But, I mean, back to your it's interesting you brought up the White House thing and the Penn Teller thing. I wasn't going to mention this, but I'm going to just because you brought it up. There's a guy in prison right now. I just found out about this recently. His name is Nathan Larson, and he's sitting in a jail cell right now because he threatened to kill the President of the United States. He's a liberty activist, and he emailed the White House. And you can find out more about him over at prisonersforliberty.com. But he wrote and said that he wanted to kill the President of the United States because he felt that he was the head of the largest criminal gang in the world, you know, the United States government. Now, whether or not you agree with that, I think most people wouldn't. His point wasn't that he was going to actually kill the president, but rather he wanted to protest the law that says you can't kill the president, or you can't say you're going to kill the President of the United States. So, I mean, we have people trying all forms of different activism. Now, is that peaceful? I don't know. I don't know if threatening someone's life is a peaceful manner.
I don't consider that to actually be peaceful. I don't, because the thing is that you don't know if he's going to follow through with that threat or not. So they don't know if there's going to be that, you know, that if that person is going to come, you know, tearing down to the White House and start attacking people. You don't know that. I mean, there's
that's where I stand, and I see a threat like that as a form of aggression, whether or not you're protesting a law or not. I mean, personally, I think it should be against the law to threaten to kill anyone and be serious about it. You know, I mean, difference between saying I'm going to kill you and just saying that as a saying, but actually writing a letter and saying my intent is to kill someone. I see that as an act of aggression myself, but I just think it's an interesting example.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've actually had threats posed against me in writing on blog posts and comments and things of that nature because people didn't like some of the things that I was covering. And I'll be honest with you, the first one or two were kind of odd, and I didn't really know how to take them, and I didn't know what to do. And I will admit that I lost some sleep about it. But see, for instance, I would not consider that peaceful protest. When you're sitting there and you've got someone fearful for their life because of your form of protest, that's not peaceful. Now, if the person said, hey, I'm going to come and I'm going to do a sit-in in front of your house until you apologize for saying A, B, or C, that's different. I wouldn't, be fearful for my life over that. And I think that's kind of the difference. If it's something that makes you afraid to walk down the street alone, there's a problem. I'm not saying that you need to make that speech illegal. What I'm saying is that you have freedom of speech. You can say these things, but just because you have freedom of speech doesn't mean that your words do not have consequences. So you are still responsible for the consequences for your statements and for the things that you say. You can say it all you want. But for instance, if I go up to a 350-pound person and insult them to their face, I have every right to do that, but I'm also going to have to deal with it if they haul off and hit me.
Well, and that's something, that was one of the First Amendment cases that came to the Supreme Court, which I forget the actual case name, but where, the whole idea of yelling fire in a theater. You can't just say things that cause a panic or that will give people an idea that that you might actually cause them harm or that harm might be done to them. And, I do see that as a form of aggression. It's one of the very few examples of where I don't believe in total freedom of speech because, like you said, there could be a legitimate fear there. And if you walk up to someone, like you said, and insult them to their face, and that brings up the interesting point of people like the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah.
And for people that don't know, they go out and protest soldiers' funerals, and they are very anti-homosexual in a very militant fashion, and they hold up very offensive signs. Basically insulting America and insulting soldiers and insulting homosexuals and saying that pretty much everyone that is a homosexual or supports homosexuals or apathetic to it are going to hell. And what I don't understand, people like that and not really the Black Panthers because they didn't really do this, but like people like that and the KKK and other militant groups that get out in the street and advocate for a lot of these things, neo-Nazis advocating for deaths of entire races. I don't understand why the police are there to protect them. I think there should be consequences for the things you say.
So you're saying they should be able to go out there and say what they want, but we shouldn't be paying for the police to protect them. They should have to deal with the consequences of their words and their statements.
Well, I mean, just like you or I, if you will get on the air, Angel, and advocate for, for instance, killing the president, or you're advocating for bombing New York City or something,
which I'm not, by the way.
Probably get fired from your job.
Which I'm not, by the way. I have to say that I'm not advocating those things. But yes, you're right. I would most likely get fired from my job for saying things like that. And that would be me dealing with the consequences of my speech, of my statements. Exactly.
So if we're going to live in a society that believes in the idea of personal responsibility, and we have to balance that against freedom of speech and understand that there are certain things that you can say that are going to be offensive, and that you have to deal with consequences. Now, neo-Nazis want to eradicate almost everyone that's not pure white. I mean, that's a threat against me. I'm not pure white. I
don't know many people that are, actually. At this point, I don't know many people that are, quote unquote, pure white, as you put it,
or Aryan, or whatever way you want to put it. But or like the Westboro people, they're going to soldiers' funerals, and you can't do anything because they'll take you. Now, the Supreme Court has actually said that their speech is legal. And I agree with the Supreme Court. What the Westboro Baptist Church is saying is perfectly legal. But the fact that your tax dollars and my tax dollars, in the instances when they're in our local jurisdictions, are going to protect them for their speech. I find it absolutely absurd. Now, I'm not an advocate for violence, but you can't stir a pot like that and not expect people to get angry.
You know what? That's a really good point, and I think that's one that I hadn't really touched on before, or I'm going to say I didn't really look at it like that until you pointed it out to me. And you're right. I mean, they do have every single right to say what it is that they're saying. They have every right to say that. And I know a lot of people were really upset when the Supreme Court said, hey, guys, this is freedom of speech. They can say it. I know a lot of people were upset with that because what they're saying is offensive. But it is pretty insulting and outrageous that our tax dollars go to pay for the salaries of the people that are protecting them. They should have to stand up for the statements that they make. They should be responsible for the actions that are caused by their statements.
Well, I mean, if you want to eradicate hate overnight, stop protecting hate groups. And that's all I mean, I really can say about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sorry, it's very controversial to say that because, you got people that believe in absolute freedom of speech, but I'm not saying that they don't have that absolute freedom of speech. What I'm saying is deal with the consequences of it. Stop stealing money from me to protect people that I don't agree with their ideas.
I've addressed this before, I think, especially, we had that case of the young girl who sent out a tweet during a school function, and she said that a politician, I believe she said he sucked. That's what she said. And the politician's office ended up asking her for an apology, and the school ended up asking her for an apology. And I was dealing with that in regards to that occurrence because yes, she had every right to say that this politician sucked. She had every right to say all the negative things she wanted to about him. But she did it during a school function on a school field trip, and you can tell she was, based on the timestamp, you could tell that she was under school supervision at the time, which means that the school has every right as well to punish her for her statements, because when you send things out like over Twitter or on the internet, it's almost the same as standing up in that auditorium and yelling it out. And they would have given her detention, or they would have, given her some kind of suspension if she had done that. Now, she felt it was appropriate to send it out on Twitter, but and that's cool. She has every right to say it, and she has every right not to apologize. But the school also has the right to give her detention.
Well, if I remember, that was Sam Brownback.
It was.
Who she said that about. And from what I understand, because of the outrage, he came back and asked for her not to apologize. Because it is a controversial opinion, but I mean, I wouldn't put that on the same level as anywhere near close as hate speech. I mean,
no,
I
it's not, but it's the
every
same.
single day. No one's making me apologize for that.
You're right. But see, you're not saying it to their faces or to their staff's faces at a function that, for instance, maybe your boss paid for. Like if I believe it was governor. I think he's a governor. I don't know. I don't know too much about the man. But if it was Governor Brownback and he was speaking at a function that your boss held and you sent that out on Twitter and your boss found out about it, your boss would probably fire you. I mean, that's...
Absolutely.
So this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. You have the right to say things, you do, but you also have to deal with the consequences of what you say. And I realize it's not as big of a thing as hate speech. It's not, but it's still the same kind of issue to me. It's not as offensive. It doesn't bother as many people because she's just, saying something about a politician, and let's face it, most of them are toolboxes. But that's just it. You have to be held responsible for your statements and for the things that you say. Otherwise, why even say them?
You're absolutely correct in that. But, I mean, that's a different argument for a different day because we could get into the issue of
I know, right?
compulsory schooling and the fact that she was forced to be there and all these things. I think there's a lot more elements to that case than just the school should punish her because she just...
No, I didn't say they should punish her. I didn't say they should punish her. I'm saying they have the right to punish her. That's it. They have the right to punish her as they see fit. And yeah, they asked for her to apologize, and she refused to. that's good. I'm glad that she refused to. But that doesn't mean that the school shouldn't be allowed to give her detention, or to give her a suspension, because they would have done that if she had done that in the crowded auditorium, if she had stood up and stated that then. See, but that, you're right, that is a whole different... Look, you had 5 political prisoners you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, let's get back to that. We've got 20 minutes left.
I know,
so.
I'm sorry. I'm going off on these tangents. Look, it happens all the time.
It's fine. All right, so and I agree, it's a good conversation, so it's not a bad thing. Another one I want to talk about, and this one, I'm kind of iffy on him just because there's a lot of evidence that he may have done what he did. But Mumia Abu-Jamal just this week was released from death row and given a life sentence instead. For people that don't know Mumia's story, he was a Black Panther, and in Philadelphia, I believe it was 1972, he was convicted of killing a cop because of an altercation he had between him, his brother, and the cop. And he's been sitting on death row ever since. The left has taken this guy on as almost like their savior, almost. He's very revered in the left, or on the left. And I don't know if Mumia is guilty or not guilty, but it seems awfully odd when you look at the history of the way that the federal government was going after Black Panthers back then. It does bring up the question, was he framed? There's a lot of instances where they were sending in people infiltrating these groups. It was called the FBI's COINTELPRO program, and they were infiltrating groups and framing people for crimes they didn't commit to put them away and to stop the radicalism, because they were afraid that society would change, that white privilege wouldn't exist anymore, and that blacks might be on an equal footing. So I don't know if Mumia did it or not, but I can understand why people support him. And I think that it is interesting that after 30 years, they're finally saying that we're not going to put you to death. You've appealed 1,000 times, but rather we're going to just put you in prison for life and let you live the rest of your days there. The conservative blogosphere has blown up. Michelle Malkin wrote something about it, and I mean, she was really upset. They kept calling him a cop killer. And the one thing I want to mention is just because someone is convicted by a jury of their peers does not necessarily mean they committed a crime. We have to be really careful when we look at convictions like that. Was the evidence strong? Because there's a lot of people who have been released from prison because of faulty evidence and people that lied. So Mumia's case is interesting because I don't know where to fall on that, but I wanted to mention it because of his downgrade in the sentence.
Yeah, see, the thing for that is that it's one of those things that's questionable for me, too, because I don't know if he did it or not. And obviously I wasn't there, so regardless, it's going to be speculation. But I talked actually earlier in the show about someone who got their death row conviction overturned because of the behavior of the jurors. And I think that some jurors don't take the consequences of holding someone's life in their hands. They don't take it as seriously as they should. They view it as, I don't know, even an excuse to get out of work, when, man, it's so much more than that when you're talking about someone's life. But the thing is, it's just one of those, it's questionable to me, because if he did do it, well then, to me, it's quite offensive, and it's almost as offensive as him, as taxpayers paying to keep him in prison for 30 years if he did do it. But if he didn't, then he should be back on the streets because he's already served like 30 years.
Yeah, and that case is really interesting. I think people should look into it just for the sake of making an informed decision and an informed opinion rather than just going off of what you or I are saying, or what the conservative blogosphere is saying, or what the liberal blogosphere is saying, because, like I said, it's a very complex case, and I think it's something that most people should take into counter evidence into consideration.
Yeah. Now let's talk Irwin Schiff.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with Irwin Schiff's case, but he's sitting in jail, I believe, for 15 years for the same crime, or so-called crime, that Ed and Elaine Brown are, which is tax evasion. He's the father of Peter Schiff, who is a radio host, the national radio host, and also is a financial advisor and fairly famous in certain circles. But he was convicted on tax evasion, and I think he's supposed to be getting out in a couple of years, but I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, I have to add, by the way, as well, that Peter Schiff is a rock star. I'm just saying Peter Schiff is awesome. And if you don't know who Peter Schiff is, schiffradio.com is the website. He's the guy. He was all over the Blaze because he went down to the Occupy movement holding a sign that said, "I'm the 1%, let's talk." And this is when a lot of people were like, oh, it's a very, very anti-capitalist movement. And he went down there to see what he could find out about it. And so, you know, if it had really been a very anti-capitalistic movement, then man, he could have been dealing with some serious issues going down there with a sign like that. But regardless, yeah, his dad is in there for the tax evasion. And to me, it's kind of horrifying, this concept of putting people in prison for a really, really long time for tax evasion, which means that our tax dollars are going to supporting them in prison. It doesn't make sense to me. Our tax dollars go to support people in prison who refuse to pay taxes.
Well, it's the whole mirage of the system itself. I mean, the entire system is based upon taxation. I mean, if there was no taxation, the state as we know it wouldn't exist. So anytime there's someone that actually wants to stand up against it and says they don't believe it's morally right, and I think these arguments are legitimate myself, in my personal opinion, I don't see taxation as a legitimate function of anyone. I see it as theft. So, you know, for the state to convict someone like this and sentence them to a very long conviction, in the case of Irwin, I just looked it up as you were talking. He got 12 years and 7 months in 2006, so he still has quite a bit to go.
Yeah.
And for that, they're doing it because they want to make an example out of someone. They want to say, look, if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to go to jail, and you are going to go to jail for a long time. It's just a way to scare people. That's all it is. So they don't really care that they're not paying their taxes. It's the fear that everyone will stop paying their taxes.
That's exactly right. That's what it is, because, and especially the people that are given such a long period of time are relatively high profile, so that a lot of attention is drawn to them. I mean, think about everything that Peter Schiff has done since 2006. And everyone knows that Peter Schiff's dad is in jail for not paying his taxes. So that is like a prime example. I mean, the man is on like 70 different radio stations nationally, and his dad's in jail for not paying taxes. So it's kind of like it's pointing a big arrow at him and saying, you see, no one's safe.
Exactly. And like the Browns. And there's more examples of this. The most famous I can think of, the most famous person sitting in a cell right now for not paying income taxes is Wesley Snipes.
Oh, yeah.
He claimed $0. I think it was 1997, and he made $7.2 million that year. And he's sitting in a cell. They didn't get him on tax evasion. They got him on not filing a tax form correctly, which is very scary, because I don't think there's anyone out here that doesn't cheat on their taxes in one way or another. I would like to meet the person who does not lie when they file taxes.
Don't say that.
And shake their hand.
Don't say that, because someone out there listening is probably an accountant who's going to get ideas and try and get my listeners into trouble.
Well, I just mean everyone in general. I mean, I don't know if there's actually an American citizen that actually is 100%.
Well, that's just the point, isn't
truthful.
it? No, see, it's not even really about being truthful, too. In many cases, they make it so that it's really easy for you to make a mistake, because these forms are just so complicated. I mean, they're so complicated, and they want so much information, and it's got to be done in such and such amount of time, and heaven forbid that you put a comma in the wrong place. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and you could end up like Wesley Snipes, sitting in a jail cell because you couldn't afford an accountant, and that's the sad reality of it. Now, Wesley Snipes could afford an accountant; he just didn't do it.
Yeah.
But we have a few more minutes. There's a couple more I'd like to talk about. One really big one. I think most people have heard his name, especially because of how big the story was this past winter and spring and summer, is Bradley Manning.
Yeah.
Bradley Manning he was in our private first class working at the Pentagon. And basically he was working in high security where he had access to a bunch of State Department files. I'm sorry, I have to say allegedly because he still has yet to be convicted on this. So allegedly Bradley Manning was taking these files out on a Lady Gaga CD, and he took the files and he allegedly released them to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. He's sitting in a cell right now it's been almost a year and a half, 2 years now, I think, and he for whistleblowing, which when Obama was running for office, when he was running for president, Obama said, I'm not going to go after whistleblowers. He's like, they are patriotic. They're doing a service to the country. They're trying to create transparency and expose crimes within corporate and government spheres.
That changed real fast.
Yes, Bradley Manning, under the Obama administration, is yet to be pardoned. In fact, Barack Obama has stated that he believes Bradley Manning is guilty and wants to see him convicted to the full extent of the law. So not only
but listen,
Bradley
it's
Manning
okay.
Accused of this, the president has actually come out and weighed his opinion on it.
And see, that's where the problem is. It's okay to think that he's guilty and want to see him prosecuted. That's fine. But he needs to actually have the case. And then you've got the president throwing in his opinion. Tell me that that's not going to sway any potential juror.
Well, his lawyer right now is trying to get it thrown out because of that. And from what I understand, there is a good chance that it will happen. Which, in the case, personally, I think he probably did it. And personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and I'm glad he did do it. There were some very embarrassing things that were released, but I don't think any of them threaten national security, as they're claiming. As far as I know, I didn't hear that people were more radicalized simply because the documents came out. There were stories that I was very glad that came out as a result of this, like the pedophilia rings going on in Afghanistan and DynCorp. DynCorp was was using U.S. tax dollars that was going to them. They're a defense contractor. They were using tax dollars that you and I pay to purchase boy prostitutes for soldiers. I mean, if he hadn't released that, even that story wouldn't have come out. So
yeah, we would never have known.
I think it's a very patriotic thing myself.
Yeah, well, see, we would never have known, and you know what? It's unfortunate that people can't come out and report the truth and report the things that they see going on, regardless of how offensive it is. And this, I think, is a perfect example of the press being shut down. Now, admittedly speaking, he wasn't a member of the press, but he still let out some information that the people wanted to know. I mean, it's a prime example of people being shut up because they don't like what they're saying.
No, and, you know, the fact is, Barack Obama promised a lot of things when he was running for president. I personally didn't vote for him, but I was secretly hoping he would get elected because I thought...
no, you didn't.
Well, listen to my justification. I secretly hoped he would be elected because I thought, well, if he's telling the truth about what he believes with civil liberties issues, then that would be a huge step forward in our country. If he's really going to protect whistleblowers, if he's really going to pardon certain nonviolent offenders, if he's going to get rid of the Patriot Act and these types of things, that'd be a positive thing for our country.
You got suckered, Corey. You got suckered. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that you bought into some of that nonsense he was spewing out.
I didn't think he was telling the truth, but I was secretly hoping that he would win and do it. I mean, that was my expectation. I I didn't actually believe it rationally. Like, I didn't really think that he would, but a part of me wanted him to, if you understand what I'm saying. And I didn't vote for him, but I was kind of hoping he would go through with this work. But obviously he hasn't. He promised transparency, and he's been the least transparent president that we've ever had in this country. So,
now, let's be fair, Corey. Did we ever ask him to define the word transparency? Because his definition of transparent may not be my definition of transparent.
Well, what is the meaning of the word is, you know, that's the famous line from Bill Clinton.
Well, yeah, well, see, that's what I'm saying. Maybe he actually thinks he has been transparent. Maybe he thinks that he has stopped lobbyists, you know, because maybe his definition of stopped is actually increase. It depends on definitions. Words are tricky things.
Well, especially for a lawyer like Barack Obama.
Good point. Now, look, we've got to close up because I still have a commercial break that I have to take before the news. So why don't you tell people where they can find you online?
All right. Well, real quick, I just want to mention again, defiantforyou.com. Again, defiantforyou.com. You can find out more about writing to political prisoners, all their addresses and instructions on doing so. That's all over there. As far as finding me on the internet, my website is CoreyMoore.net. That's CoreyMoore.net. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Corey A. Moore. Again, it's Corey is how you spell my name.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Corey. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully we will be talking to you again soon. The Angel Clark Show will return in just a moment. Don't touch that dial.
Just look me in the eyes and say the world's not gonna Take stock in
The Marine Weather is sponsored by Brighton Homes, single-family homes in the right location with the features you love and the prices you want. For more information, call us at 329-9301 or go to brytonhomes.com.
This is your WGMD marine forecast for the Delaware waters and the Delaware Bay. Strong high pressure over the upper Ohio Valley will move slowly eastward and reach our coastal waters this afternoon. The high will remain over the mid-Atlantic and New England states into Wednesday. For today, north winds 10 to 15 knots with gusts up to 20 knots, becoming northeast 5 to 10 knots this afternoon, seas 2 to 4 feet. For tonight, northeast winds 5 to 10 knots, seas 2 to 3 feet. This has been your WGMD marine forecast.
It's your car. You take it to people you trust.
Don't rebuild. You want to rip out your leg.
It's your finances. You want to go to the experts.
Cut your payments by 50%.
We've got to find a way to get out from under this debt.
We can help. The National Foundation for Credit Counseling is a nonprofit organization that has been helping people for 60 years. Speak with a counselor today at 800-388-2227 or visit debtadvice.org. This is a public service campaign for the NFCC.
Selective Service presents easy ways to stay out of trouble.
If something smells like feet, don't eat it.
And here's the easiest way of all to stay out of trouble. When a guy turns 18, he should